Hi, I'm Dove Sinclair with the Power of the Patient Project. My guest today is Dr. David Posen, who is here for his second interview to discuss what employees can do today to reduce workplace stress. Once again, Dr. Posen has devoted his time exclusively to stress management, lifestyle counseling, and psychotherapy. He is a well-known speaker and educator and has worked with some of the world's largest companies on how to manage stress. David is also a best-selling author of 5 books and has appeared on multiple TV and radio shows across Canada and has also been quoted in many leading US media outlets. So welcome, Dr. Posen. I'm so glad to see you again.
Me too. Thank you very much, Dove.
Yeah, so last time we talked a lot about contributing factors to workplace stress, but are there anything specific that employees can use today if they are feeling overwhelmed with work?
Well, and I appreciate the opportunity to talk to you about this again, Dove, because the first conversation we had was about essentially what the workplace needs to do to stop making people sick in the first place. And while there were some ideas that can be applicable to individual employees, I wanted to now share some ideas about what individuals can do. And by the way, it's really interesting because when we talk about employees, it's not just frontline people, but it's managers and it's senior managers and it's executives, really all the way up the food chain. So a lot of what I'm going to talk about today really pertains to all of them.
Mhm.
And the first statement that I would make is that the key to stress management, or what I like to call stress mastery, is to control the things that you can control. Sometimes I'm asked, what's the key to stress management? One sentence. My answer is control the things that you can control, because there's a lot of things we don't control, obviously.
Right.
We don't control the weather. We don't control the economy. We don't control the virus that's now about to enter its second official year as a pandemic. And we don't control other people's behavior. And we don't control company policy. There's a lot of things we don't control. But the good news is that we have more control than we think, because we control the way we behave, we control the way we think, and we control the lifestyle choices we make. And when we take more control in those areas, we can do a lot to reduce our own stress, no matter what's going on in the organization.
Yeah, definitely. And speaking of control, what are some things that employees can control and manage their workload?
Well, when I think about this, there's two phrases that I use: work smart and work fresh.
Mhm.
And what I mean by that, the workplace in the last 20 years has really accelerated as the workloads built up, and with downsizing, more people or fewer people are asked to do more work and so on. The speed is ramped up exponentially. And so when I think about people trying to cope with all of this, first of all, people were being asked to work harder. Then they were asked to work faster. Then they were being asked to work longer hours. And we've sort of wrung all the water out of the towel, and people are still struggling. And so my message is, we've tried, harder, faster, longer. How about working smarter and more strategically?
Mm.
And the second thing is what I call working fresh. So what do I mean by working smarter? Well, first of all, it's helpful when your boss and so on helps you to, and every company should be doing this, organize the work in a realistic way and also prioritize the work so they're not just heaping stuff on people. But individuals with their own workload and their own tasks. And mostly I'm talking now about knowledge workers, not so much people who are working with their hands and on an assembly line or something. But the point is that you also can take some responsibility for how you organize your work and how you prioritize your work. And if you have anybody to delegate to, so now we're talking about supervisors, managers, and so on, delegate as much as you can appropriately, not buck passing where you're dumping it on other people. But when sometimes when people are overloaded, I say to them, ask two questions: who could be doing this other than me, and who should be doing this other than me? And by the way, there are benefits to the delegate too,
Yeah.
because they have more challenge. It's learning experiences for them. They feel like they're doing meaningful work and contributing and so on. So it's not about buck passing if it's done properly.
Mhm.
But another thing, uh, and I talk about things like having shorter to-do lists. Don't try to do too much in a day. You know, especially type A people, they're always trying to do more in less time. And it become they overload themselves in some cases. It's really interesting when I tease this apart with patients. Sometimes they realize, you know what, my boss isn't doing this to me. I'm doing this to me. So checking in on yourself to see whether you're creating some of this. Another thing is to set realistic time frames for things. You know, you think something's going to take 10 minutes, but it actually takes 20.
Mhm.
So that's helpful. Another thing, this is always a bit of a showstopper, learn to say no. There are times when we have to protect ourselves. One of my sayings is that being selective is self-protective.
Mhm.
Protecting yourself against overload, against exhaustion and high stress. So there are two questions that I ask in my seminars. First of all, when is it appropriate to say no, and how to say no? So when to say no? When you are overloaded, when you're tired or even exhausted, when you're not feeling well, when your plate is already full to overflowing. There are times when you simply have to say no, enough. Excuse me. And it's about giving yourself permission to say no appropriately. You don't have, it doesn't have to be your favorite word, but there are times when you have to give yourself, as I say, permission to say and no and push back a little. But here's the interesting thing: how to say no? You almost never use the word no. You say things like, "I'd like to be able to do this, but I can't right now," or "I can do part of it, but not all of it," or to say, things like, I can do this next Monday." It may not, work for the other person, but at least you've offered. Um, but there are times when you actually, if the requests are coming from your boss, you might want to say, "Here's what I've got on the go right now. What do you want me to set aside?" So rather than you taking responsibility for prioritizing the work, ask your boss to help you prioritize. I do this with my assistant all the time. Please set that aside, take care of this now, and the other thing can wait till tomorrow, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
So there are a number of ways of saying no, and without ever saying the word no. But it's important at times to set boundaries and limits so that you don't just keep saying yes, and then you're working into the evenings and weekends and so on. So those are some of the ways of working smarter. Um, Working fresh has to do with managing your energy. This is actually, in a sense, stress management as energy management.
Right.
Um, and this has to do with pacing yourself better. Taking time out is really important. So many people just don't even think of that anymore. They just go, go, go. And suddenly it's 2 o'clock and they haven't even had lunch, and they didn't even take a mid-morning break to, go stretch their legs and so on. I think people should be taking a mid-morning break, a break at lunch, a mid-afternoon break, and a break at supper time. I do this in my work. I always have. And the research is really interesting because actually the um, the productivity levels, first of all, less stress, more energy, because when you take time out, you have a chance for your stress level to come down, but also to have your energy level rejuvenated.
Mhm.
Um, uh, and the productivity levels of people who take time out is actually quite enhanced. So those are some of the things about working smarter and working harder and working fresh. Um, and the other thing is working fewer hours. I have this diagram that I use with my patients. I call it the inefficiency cycle. Um, Too many people are working long hours and they're exhausted. So here's what the diagram. Here's what it's meant to show. When you are tired, you're less efficient. Takes you longer to get things done, so you have less time for self-care. Sleep and leisure and hobbies and exercise and so on, which keeps you tired and keeps you on this treadmill. And the irony is that, as I said the other day, the things we cut back on are the things that would be most helpful. We start skipping lunch, and then we don't meet a friend for work, for a drink, or go to the gym after work. And then we stay up late to finish a report or something, so we don't get enough sleep. Those are the things that would actually help us to work more productively and to actually need fewer hours to do the work. I get all my patients who are working long hours, and if they're highly stressed, which they all are, that's why they're referred to me. I get them to cut back on their work hours, and they look at me like I'm a little loopy at times. But I explain the logic, and I say, trust me, we're going to do this gradually, but invariably, they find that they're more productive working fewer hours, and they're amazed. I'm not anymore because I've seen it proven over and over again. But it really makes a difference to pace yourself that way. Another thing is to leave buffer time. Sometimes if you have a meeting attached to a meeting attached to a meeting, I had a patient who told me she has so many meetings one after another that she doesn't even have time to go to the bathroom. So I said to her, "What do you do?" And she said, "I cross my legs a lot." You know, we need to leave buffer time and time to, just time to clear your head. I
Yeah.
take a break mid-morning when I'm seeing patients, just to clear my head and get ready for the next patient.
Yeah, no, I think that's so important. I feel like more people, employees need to realize that. But I think a huge problem is too, everyone's always so scared to actually go to their boss and, say I need to work less hours or I need to, take time for myself because they're scared of, either getting fired or, there's always that pressure that they feel like they have to please constantly.
Yeah. Well, the real measure should be, look at my results and my output. You know, um, not how many hours I'm putting in. It's really interesting because I use this example. When I was in med school, our exams were 3 hours. Okay, but
Mhm.
some of my classmates would leave after 2.5 hours. And some of us would look around. How did you do that? And then they would get A's. They weren't marked on how long they stayed in the exam. They just got marked on, did you get the answers right? And so when people can prove that fewer hours will actually enhance their productivity, they don't have to be working 10 hours a day. They can get the work done in 9. It just has to be judged by results.
Mhm.
And by the way, as I've said before, everything I'm saying applies to bosses, managers, all the way up the food chain. They could all use this lesson, and if they all do it collaboratively, and sometimes somebody has to be the trendsetter to say, "I'm going to do this," and find that the world doesn't fall apart, and then it becomes more generally accepted.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And I think I mentioned this a little bit last time, but I know a lot of people are working from home now, and a main source of communication is emails. So, what happens when people feel overwhelmed with those emails? Or do you have any tips to share?
Oh, I certainly do. And I call it the data deluge. I mean, it's like an avalanche, and everybody's just suffering, struggling with this. First of all, I tell people don't check email in the morning, first thing in the morning, especially if you're a morning person. I mean, when you start work, because so many people open their email first thing. If you do that, and especially if you're a morning person, you will give away your most productive 30 to 60 minutes a day where you are ready to do your most high concentration tasks. So that's the first thing. Now, if you have to check email to make sure there were no emergencies overnight, fine. Take a quick look, nothing urgent, close it. Don't get down that rabbit hole. Oh my gosh, I got something from Laura. I haven't heard from her in a long time. Don't go there. Um, and by the way, talk about morning person and managing your energy. There are people who are larks and people who are owls. Some people, I'm a morning person, so I'm more productive in the morning. So I do my high concentration tasks in the morning, and I do my high activity tasks in the afternoon. That's when I, answer phone calls and deal with email and so on. But my high concentration tasks are when I'm fresh. Another thing, by the way, is don't check email at bedtime. Some people, before they go to bed, oh, I'll just check my email. I think people who are checking their email at bedtime are just trolling for trouble. They're just, oh, I wonder if there's anything to keep me up for another half an hour. Don't check email at bedtime. It's really a trap. Another thing is you choose when you check email. So maybe you're going to check 4 or 5 times a day. I check mid-morning, I check, around lunchtime, maybe, mid-afternoon before I go for my afternoon walk, late afternoon. Um, but you pick the time. And if you have anything on your computer that goes ring, bings, or bops to say you've got mail, you know, turn it off. So you decide when you're going to check mail. Another thing that I've done over the years, I don't answer most of my emails when I get them unless it's going to be something very quick. But if I want to answer, I have a separate file. I call it answering. And I will drag that email into that file. And then when I'm ready to answer emails, they're all sitting in one place. I don't have to look for them. And then I just bing them off, one after another. Um, Two things that came from a book called The Hamster Revolution, really good book. And it's a small 100-page book. They talk about send less, get less. And the authors, I can't remember all of their names. Actually, I do. Song, Halsey, and Burrus. It's a very good book, The Hamster Revolution. They did a lot of research and they found that 60% of the emails that we send will either require or elicit a response. So if you want to get less, send less. Be your own, control system that way. Another thing is they talk about the two most overused functions on email are reply all and CC. Use them respectfully and sparingly because you don't have to fill up other people's inboxes. But if you're answering one person, not everybody has to see your reply or your brilliant rejoinder if you think you're being clever about something, stuff like that. And I guess the only other thing is get off lists. If you're getting emails from, what do you call it? Letters that people send out, or you're on somebody's joke list, and the jokes aren't very funny. Anyway, instead of just deleting all the time, just go to the bottom and say unsubscribe, and they won't bother you anymore. So those are some of the, but we do have to take control of email, and we have to be respectful of one another so that we're not messing up other people. And by the way, if you exchange more than 2 emails with somebody, for example, to find a time to meet or something like that, pick up the phone. We forget that sometimes the lower tech is still much more efficient. You can get it done that way. One last thing, don't use email for anything that has subtlety in it, emotional content, nuance, or whatever. I have seen, companies, and I've seen families get riven apart because somebody sent an email with wording that got misconstrued by other people. They were trying to be very diplomatic, but it still was taken the wrong way. And emojis aren't the answer. If there's anything that has to do with subtlety or they need to hear the tone of your voice, the telephone, please.
Yeah, those are great tips. I'm certainly gonna remember those and use them in the future.
Yeah, thank you.
Now, what about self-care strategies and like developing a work-life balance? How can people better develop that?
Well, when I think of self-care, I actually think of a couple of things. And one of them is health habits. And this is very funny because as soon as I talk about health habit, oh, you know what? I forgot one thing.
Mm.
Avoid multitasking.
Mm.
Can we talk about that just really quickly? I talk about productivity myths in my book, Is Work Killing You? One of them is working long hours. And this is the whole story about that. Long hours do not contribute to productivity past a certain point. You're actually fighting against your own productivity. But another one is multitasking. People think that if they can multitask, they're going to be more productive, do 2 things at once, get twice as much done. The research actually shows quite the opposite. It decreases productivity. You lose time, you miss things, and you make mistakes.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're working, doing physical work, that's when people get injured too, when they're trying to do more than one thing at the same time. But physiologically, it's not possible anyway. You can't do 2 things. You can't attend to 2 things in the same instant. So if you think you can scan your email while you're talking on the phone, you can't, because your attention goes one way and then the other way. And what people think is multitasking is actually switch tasking. They're flipping back and forth. but they're not getting full value in both directions. So avoid multitasking, and the prescription is monotasking or single tasking. If you do one thing at a time with full attention, you'll actually be much more productive.
Mm.
Now, when it comes to self-care, I talk about health habits and I talk about work-life balance. So on the health habits side of the ledger, I talk about good nutrition, adequate sleep, regular exercise, and avoiding the vices. And I put that in quotes on my slide because I include caffeine, which I'll talk about quickly. But the point is when I put this slide up, people's eyes glaze over. Oh, here we go again. You had to invite a doctor. Now we're going to hear about jogging and broccoli and kale and quinoa and all that healthy stuff. But it's so mundane that we ignore it. And it's too bad because the payoffs are huge when you pay attention to these things. Sleep deprivation is fascinating because we are a sleep deprived society to a tune of about 60 to 90 minutes a night.
Wow.
Here's an interesting piece of research data. In 1913, the average North American, well, the average American, I'm assuming it included Canada, where I am, was sleeping 9 hours a night. 1913. In 1942, the average American was sleeping 8 hours a night. In 2013, a century later, the average American was sleeping just under 7 hours a night, 6.8. Okay, so in 1 century, we're getting 2 hours less sleep a night than we were 100 years ago. But physiologically, 100 years is just a snap of the finger. We haven't changed physiologically. Most of us need around 8 hours sleep a night, and we're not getting it. And the symptoms of sleep deprivation are almost all symptoms of stress. Fatigue, physical tiredness. It affects mental function, decrease in concentration, decrease in short-term memory. It affects your mood. So people are a little irritable, a little cranky, a little grumpy, maybe more easily frustrated, quicker to anger. But it can also lead to depression, and not necessarily major depressive illness, but just they feel a little flat, a little down, and so on. Those are all symptoms of sleep deprivation. In addition to which, it impairs your immune system because we produce T lymphocytes when we sleep. So those are the cells that fight infection. So if you don't get enough sleep, you get run down, you get a cold or a flu or something like that. I'm not talking about COVID right now. But the point is that those are all symptoms of stress, of chronic stress. So sleep deprivation shows up in our bodies as stress. I get all my patients to start getting the sleep they need. They feel like totally different people. And by the way, I was sleep deprived for 30 years when I was younger, busy family doctor, active in sports and playing music and stuff like that. Now that I get the sleep I need, which I have been doing for about the last few decades, it's profoundly different, better, and people have less stress.
Mm-hmm.
So the sleep thing is paramount. Just get the sleep you need. Start going to bed earlier, half an hour earlier for a few nights and another half an hour until you can wake up without your alarm, feeling well rested, or before your alarm goes off, feeling well rested and having good daytime energy. That's get the sleep you need. The second thing is exercise, and exercise is fascinating because in terms of all the benefits of exercise, you'd win a Nobel Prize if you could make a pill that had all those things. Not only things like controlling blood weight and blood pressure and good for diabetes and so on, but the thing about exercise is that it's a wonderful way of reducing stress. It drains off stress energy, but it also elevates mood. So if you're feeling down, if you're feeling depressed, one of the prescriptions for people who are depressed is to get some form of regular exercise. I get my patients to go for a walk every day, at least that. If they don't feel like going to the gym, which they don't, just go for a walk. So exercise is really important in terms of stress energy, stress reduction. But it also, and this is the fascinating part about exercise, is that it actually generates energy. After a run or my walk, I actually will have more energy sometimes if I was tired, go home, then get on my bike, go for a bike ride. I end up with more energy. And there's a lot of physiology behind that, which we won't get into. But more sleep and more exercise are the two critical things. And then the only other thing that I sometimes slide in is caffeine. It's very subtle, but caffeine is actually a stimulant, and it stimulates the release of adrenaline and the release of cortisol, the two main hormones in the stress reaction. So it actually literally creates a stress reaction in your body. So I get all my patients to go off caffeine for 3 weeks when they first come to see me. Some of them aren't thrilled, but I get more bang for the buck and more positive feedback from that one intervention than almost any single thing that I ask patients to do. And I tell them it's an experiment, 3 weeks. Try it. You'll tell me after 3 weeks if it makes a difference. If it doesn't, you can go back to it. I'm not a purist, but at least 75 to 80% of my patients, and I've been doing this for 30, 35 years, feel better without it. Many of them feel dramatically better too, by the way. They feel more calm, they feel more relaxed, they sleep better, and as a result, they have more energy, which is a real paradox. You take away a stimulant, you have more energy, but that's the case. But, and I have to make sure I tell this to everybody. By the way, this is coffee, tea, cola drinks, chocolate, and energy drinks, Red Bull and Rockstar and so on. But you have to do this gradually. If you stop abruptly, you will get withdrawal headaches, and they're true migraine headaches. You have to wean yourself off, reduce by one a day or one every other day until you're off, and then stay off for 3 weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And if you go back on caffeine, at least stop around lunchtime, absolutely no later than 3 in the afternoon, because it stays in your system 6 to 10 hours and it messes up your sleep.
Mm-hmm.
Long answer on that one.
Yeah.
Should we?
No, that's good though. So exercise, get more sleep, wean yourself off of caffeine.
Yeah, and it's so basic and it's so humdrummy and it's so, is that the best he can come up with? But until you've done that, so I mean that's the low-hanging fruit really in terms of self-care. But the payoff for making these changes is absolutely profound. In terms of lower stress, more energy, better productivity, better mood, improves your relationships, improves self-esteem. You feel better about yourself when you take better care of yourself.
Right.
You need to make time for leisure. Having a good variety of leisure activities is great, and some of them can be very constructive. Gardening and stuff like that, social entertainment, all kinds of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Make time for that. Do something. My motto is do something for yourself every day.
Yeah.
At least 30 to 60 minutes a day.
Yeah, definitely. That sounds really important. And now, like you said, we're in a culture that, everyone seems to be running on empty and they're just go, go, go all the time, 100% of the day. So looking in the future, how can we kind of start to make a healthier workplace?
Well, this is a great question because for a lot of people, and when I have to admit, when I started to write my book, Is Work Killing You? My target audience was companies, employers, HR people, like you people who are making the decisions and pushing work down to people, please pay attention. You're burning people out, you're overwhelming them. And the irony of all of that is you're getting less out of them. You're getting less productivity out of them when you stress them out like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, I talk about the volume of work, the workload, the velocity, the speed, the pace of work, slow it down a little. Not everything has to be done, by 4 o'clock this afternoon type of thing. More realistic time frames, more realistic deadlines and so on. But the other piece of it is that everybody who works in a workplace is a stakeholder and everybody can be part of the solution. It's not just from on high. In fact, most change in most organizations doesn't come from the top down. It comes from the middle up or even the bottom up. Mm-hmm. And I say to people, in management and so on, listen to your employees. Ask them, what's one thing that we can do to change our workflow or whatever to make it more efficient? They'll come up with lots of ideas. So if you're an employee, don't feel disempowered. Well, I'm just an employee. I don't have any voice around here. You can have a voice. But what I say to people is don't try to be a lone wolf. Don't try to do it yourself. Okay. Don't put yourself out on a limb. First of all, start talking. We need to start talking about these things, and we need to start talking about them in the workplace, or at least among our work colleagues, even if it's over lunch hour or for a walk or something. By the way, taking a walk at lunch hour with some of your colleagues, pretty good way of taking some breaks and combining a timeout with some exercise. You can even have a walking meeting, if you walk. But anyway, the point is find some like-minded people. Like start talking about these things, and then things like getting more sleep. Some people brag about, oh, I don't get 5 hours sleep a night, or oh, vacation. I haven't had a vacation. I haven't had a day off in 18 months. Don't brag about that stuff. That's just not healthy. So start to talk to other people, find like-minded people, and then start to build consensus and bring other people in. And then start to say, okay, what are some changes that we can suggest? Down sort of near the bottom of the flow of the org chart. And don't go to management with complaints. Don't go to management with problems. Go with solutions. Go with suggested strategies, and say, we've noticed this. That every time so and so gets an idea, they fire off an email. I've heard this, by the way, from several patients. Every time my boss, gets an idea, he or she fires off an email, and I'm just, my phone's ringing all the time with all these ideas. Look into this, or have you, get me this. So could you please gather your emails and suggestions? Most of them are very valuable, but could you send them maybe once a day or twice a day? That would be a suggestion. But you frame it as a solution. And then you can say, we think that this would be helpful. Can we do a little pilot project? Can we try this for 3 months and then see how it works out? And then you have to decide, and what are the metrics you're going to use to measure it? Is it going to be output? Is it going to be less absenteeism? Is it going to be less projects arriving late? What are we going to do to prove that this actually was an improvement? So if you have ideas, well, first of all, if you're struggling with things, talk to other people about, I'm struggling with this. Are you? Then say, let's see who else is, in agreement with this. I'll bet the other people are feeling the same way. Build consensus. Then you go to your boss as a group, not individually, and you go with suggestions and solutions. And your people on the front lines, they're the ones who know better than anybody what's not working and what could work better. And you can be very valuable to the organization that way. So the ideas don't just always have to come from management and executives and so on. Don't think that you, even as a single employee, don't have things to contribute. And if everybody pools their ideas and is willing to try new things and so on, it'll be better. It'll be better for you. It'll be better for the organization. And actually, it'll be better in terms of getting messages to people at the top. Hey, maybe I don't have to be working these nutty hours either, So it can be a win-win and a win-win-win. But everybody can play a role because everybody's a stakeholder. And as I said the other day, it's a shared responsibility. Don't look to management to solve every problem, but don't let them look at you and say, you're the ones who have to, protect yourself and keep yourself healthy. So those are the ideas that I think, would allow everybody to feel some stake in the game and somewhat empowered that they can make a difference. Because, changes in the world have always come from the bottom up or from the middle up, not top down.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. So thank you for sharing all those tips. I'm so sure that all of our viewers, I certainly will definitely remember some of those too, going into the future, into the work.
Thank you, Don. And you don't have to feel like a rebel. You don't have to be, this isn't about revolution here. This is about being constructive, but I have to tell you, Doug, first of all, thank you for the opportunity to talk to you. But this, patient project that you're doing, I just think is terrific, and I'm very grateful for the opportunity to contribute. I really am.
No, thank you for coming on and agreeing to do not one, but two interviews with us.
My pleasure.